But first, let's have this conversation. A recent Unicef poll has revealed that almost 50% of young people in the country are reconsidering starting a family due to climate concerns. According to that report poll, disasters such as floods, air pollution and drought have also played quite a major role in the youth's relocation and financial decisions. That study shows that young people's futures are at stake if nothing is done to mitigate the impact of climate change on their lives. Let's unpack the report further now. Bring in Unicef spokesperson Toby live to us from the capital this morning. Great to see you, Toby. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Really interesting, the findings of this poll. In fact, there are some people who are categorizing the climate change crisis as a youth problem. No surprises then that this is how young people are responding to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for having Unicef on. I think the poll really shows how mindsets are changing, among children and young people. They're really thinking about the future. What does it look like for them? And even then, thinking about, should I even start a family if that's something I wanted to do? So that really is obviously concerning. And it's also not surprising because the poll also showed that 64% of youth respondents said they had been impacted in some way by a climate or environment-related event. Like air pollution, like drought, and some said that their homes had been damaged, education had been disrupted. So what we're seeing is the impact now, and I think that's the biggest concern. Children are being impacted now, and they're seeing that impact. They're thinking about the future. What does it look like? Which is why, of course, climate action today is so important.
And much of it is actually driven by young activists. Are you able to take us through the nature of the questions that were asked in this poll? Because it's quite a broad statement to say that young people, for instance, are reconsidering starting a family, because when you think about that, there's so much to consider, right? Family is not just about having offspring. There's questions around legacy, keeping your name alive, etc., etc. So in an effort to narrow it down a bit more, help us, I guess, take stock of the kind of questions you are asking these young people.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And let me sort of be frank. The Europort poll is really trying to get a pulse, a pulse from young people about how they're thinking, what they're thinking about. So the set of questions really tries to just to take that pulse to see what the reaction is from young people. And of course, there are many factors, around starting a family. But I think what was interesting is we can get a sense of what children, what young people are thinking. It targets people between 15 and 24 years old primarily. And it gives them an opportunity to feedback on the questions that go out there, in this case, of course, related to climate change. But we can provide resources through the poll as well, so people can access resources about climate change education. Where can they get support? What are the issues that are being spoken about as well? So it's a two-way communication. But you're right, it's really getting a pulse, getting a sense of what are children and young people thinking at this particular time.
Of those young people who've taken this decision, or at least who've expressed this kind of sentiment, how many of them are actively, do you reckon, trying to stop the effects of climate change? Because it's one thing, of course, to not, for argument's sake, want to bring children into the world because you don't think the world's going to be around for long enough. And it's another to actively campaign in order to change that.
Yeah, I think children and young people in South Africa, but also, across the world, are really stepping up. They're doing extraordinary work on climate action at a local level, at a regional level, and at a national level. We see a COP27 that's happening now in Egypt. The South African government, has encouragingly had 5 youth delegates as part of their official delegation in Egypt. And they've been playing a massive role hosting events in Egypt, talking about the issues, but also putting out solutions that can really provide community-based solutions. So we're seeing action from children and young people everywhere. And what UNICEF is trying to do, and the UN more broadly, and civil society, is really to help provide the platform for these children and young people to get their views out there, to get their voices out there, to influence policy, but also to have some practical solutions. And now what we're seeing with the so-called green economy that's coming up, the renewable energy, how can we get children and young people skilled to be able to move into those jobs that could be coming up? And we actually saw in a previous poll, actually, not this one, but the green economy was stated by a lot of young people as really something that they aspire to. They see opportunity. They see other jobs coming up through renewables, etc.
It's interesting to see that part of what the poll also revealed is that some young people are willing to relocate in order to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Any kind of insight about where they might be going to in a context where this is, as we know, a global issue?
Yeah, obviously we see very vulnerable communities in South Africa, in forced settlements, townships, etc. And children and young people are aware of that because they're seeing the impact on a daily basis. So, for example, in KZN during the floods, I recently heard from a school teacher who was talking about how the school flooded very quickly because the drains weren't cleared. And now she's got young people, she's got children acting to help clear the drains, to set up a sort of climate emergency committee to work to keep the schools safer. But we see very vulnerable communities, and it's about investing in the adaptation, providing some basic, simple solutions such as cleaning drains at a school, but also sharing information about how to act in the event of an emergency. Yeah. But of course, young people who are in those situations are looking to move to safer areas.
Sure. I might be trying to connect two very unrelated issues, for lack of a better term, but just recently the UN, I think it was yesterday actually, confirming that there are 8 billion people now in the world and counting. We're learning from your poll that young people are, at least in South Africa, reconsidering starting a family. I wonder whether or not this is a sign that things like climate change may actually decelerate the rate at which population growth takes place.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say, of course, but I think if you look at the statistics and with UNFPA, who look at the population figures, we see in the future that the population growth will stabilize and will start to fall even further down the line. And climate change could definitely play an impact in that. And we see that through this poll, that young people are thinking about the future, maybe more now than they did in the past when I was younger and when others were younger. So it's definitely an issue that's coming up.
Without a doubt. Interesting insights. Toby Fricka, thanks very much indeed for helping us connect the dots, as it were. Really appreciate your time. Toby is the spokesperson for Unicef. Once again, thanks very much indeed.